Hi, my name is Harris. I'm one of your podcast hosts. I'm also a lawyer at Treadstone Law. For most Canadians, buying, selling, or refinancing real estate, a lawyer is the last thing on their mind. That's unfortunate because lawyers play a vital role in the process. But what choices do Canadians have? Lawyers can be very expensive. Well, Treadstone Law offers resources to Canadians so they have access to the information they need. Whether you sign up for a live workshop or a mailing list, we cover topics to help you make informed decisions and avoid costly mistakes. It's advice you can start using today, and best of all, it's free. Visit treadstonelaw.ca/MAS offer or click the link below to get access right now. If you're looking to retain Treadstone Law, it's never been easier. Our entire process is online. From completing the retainer agreement to your signing appointment, everything is done from the comfort of your own home. We're your digital lawyers. The best part of it is that you don't pay anything when you're retaining our firm. Visit treadstonelaw.ca/MAS offer or click on the link below to retain us right now. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Hustle and Grit. Today on my podcast, I have Stein Tan. Stein is a high achiever that has been through both the lender side and broker side of the industry. Before moving towards the broker side, Stein worked for Canada's largest alternative lender, Home Trust. His passion to help individuals who are also interested in personal investment through various growth vehicles has brought him to EQT Mortgages and enter the broker side of the industry. Welcome to the podcast, Stein.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I was going through your profile. You've got an MBA. You're a well-educated broker. How did you kind of get into the industry? Why don't you kind of get the listeners to kind of understand what your background was, what got you to not only get into mortgages, but also you went from the lender side to a broker side, which happens. I don't know. It's an interesting kind of jump. So why don't you kind of run through what your kind of journey was through the mortgage broker industry?
So I came back to Canada in 2013 after finishing up education at Harvard, and I joined Home Trust as for their IT with their IT group, where we mapped out the whole systems processes and the business processes for their systems upgrade, in which that we basically upgraded their whole SAP system from I think it was 5.0 to 6.0. And when we were mapping out the process, I noticed that there were so much inefficiencies in the broker space, and there was still a lot of money to be made. And I thought that it's interesting. So I stayed there for a year, and I left Home Trust to go to the broker space and try out how I can help clients better, because a lot of the observations that I've had at Home Trust were a lot of the files were submitted to us as half baked. Most of the brokers doesn't really provide much information, not because they don't want to provide information. It's probably sometimes it's hard to provide information when clients are in a difficult position, and that made me realize that there should be a market for privates. And I looked into it further, and I noticed that privates are a big thing. And I definitely afterwards I joined the industry and focused on B lending and privates. Slowly through time, I transitioned from B to more privates. So right now, most of the business are like 90% private and probably 10% B, I would say.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. And I want to get to privates in a second, but I just want to jump back to what you kind of started off with. So you said you graduated from Harvard?
Yeah, I did.
What did you do at Harvard? What were you studying at Harvard at?
I studied general management. So it's a program that they have for most students if you get into the program,
Yeah.
and it's like a typical MBA management course. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's very impressive. So what then, with a Harvard degree, working out mapping processes from a bank, for a bank at least. I know you're talking about some of the stuff that they weren't basically there's inefficiencies there that you could capitalize on and make it kind of more efficient when you move into the broker space. But I don't think it's like it's that easy of correct me if I'm wrong. It's not that easy of a jump because with a bank, I'm assuming, you've got like a nice job, you've got a nice paycheck, and then all of a sudden when you're going into the broker side, it's very much self-employed. It's very much you're earning what you're bringing in. There's an unpredictability to it. So what made you think, okay, I'm going to jump into this regardless of that kind of uncertainty?
Well, when I moved into broker space, I do have some savings. I have at
Mm.
least 10 years of savings with me,
Yeah.
from prior savings, and um, from the lender space to the broker space. I was aware that it wouldn't be easy.
Mm.
First 2 years of my of brokering was definitely difficult because a lot of things were unclear to me. The
Yeah.
policies in Canada and a lot of these things I wasn't too familiar with. And the broker house that I was with during that time uh, provided some support, but not. Uh, we always want more support. That's how I would say it.
Yeah.
And um, and eventually it didn't work out because uh, the training that I received wasn't sufficient enough for me to understand how to do business development. That was one of the
Hmm.
parts that I wasn't aware of when I moved to the broker space. Uh, I moved into the broker space thinking that, hey, I have this product neat. People will help me out. People will reach out to me, and I'll be able to help people out. But eventually, there I realized that there are a lot of brokers, first of all. Second of all, is trust is a big issue. Third of all, not your friends and families most of the time. They would ask for an opinion, but they wouldn't want us to see their financial situation.
Hmm.
So I've had situations where friends and family come to me asking for advice. I give them the best advice, but then eventually I find out later on they go with another broker just because they don't feel comfortable showing me their financial situation.
Yeah.
And that put me into a different frame of thinking during that time. I asked myself, so where do I go? So what I did, I started cold calling people, probably around 200 to 500 calls per day.
Oh,
Um,
whoa. That is impressive. Those are impressive numbers to post.
yeah, and then it was crazy because most of the time people will hang up, people will find excuse, people will say it's not a good time and they call me back, and when we call
Mm.
them back, they don't answer anymore, right? And some people are just not. Some people just say they're not interested and all that. And I've had experience of where been put down a lot of times. And
Mm.
I even had one experience where I had an appointment from cold calling, and then when I went to that guy's house, the guy had his dog chase after me. So I was running from the dog during that time. It was a crazy experience. That was when starting out. Then I got into trouble with what was that Fisco during that time because one of my advertising materials, which was approved by the broker of record during that time, did not indicate the broker of record's license number, and that
Mm.
was a big must to be put on. So they gave me a warning, and then after that, I decided to change brokerage because obviously, if they approved something and I still got into trouble, it means that they didn't put enough effort into looking into it, and
Yeah.
this for me staying around.
Yeah.
But first 2 years were definitely tough. Didn't even do much business in the first 2 years, but kept calling people, kept walking around until I got my first deal from a coworker, a prior coworker, which was very funny because uh, she was a subordinate of mine, and she reached out because she needed a private, and I was like, during that time, private, I wasn't that well versed in private still. So What I
Mm.
did was I called a bunch of BDMs, and I set up an appointment, and I went through their product sheet with them, understand their underwriting criteria, and then understand how to underwrite a private deal. And that's when it started coming, because eventually this lady went out to get to do a much more business with me when she started her real estate business, where she buys residents for to rent, and
Mm.
she's been scaling now. She has like I think 30 or 40 properties now, but all of them are in privates. So it's
Oh
still,
wow.
as long as the money makes sense for her,
Yeah.
um, she's doing that and she's making money.
So are your privates then, because you're saying vast majority of your business is in privates, is a lot of it with investors, or is it kind of, are you seeing both investors and people just kind of borrowing against their primary home? Like, what do you see any kind of patterns when
So
you look at private?
with regards to private, yeah. So there are these are the new patterns that I've been seeing with regards to private. I'll tell you what.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you the first one. The first pattern I'm seeing is the down payment assistance pattern, where people don't have enough 20% down payment, and they
Mm-hmm.
come to us and they say, "I need a 20% down. How do we do this?" I said, "Okay, we can give you a private, and we close on the same day as you're closing your first mortgage, and you we register afterwards." And that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, some people, they just don't qualify for anything, and they come to me saying that they have this property, and I looked at it and I see if the property is worthwhile. From what I learned from Home Trust, a property is worthwhile if it can sell within 13 days. So we
Mm.
evaluate the property very carefully. If the property can, we gauge the property if it can sell within 13 days, because after 13 days you start losing money. If we can sell
Mm-hmm.
the property in 13 days, then we normally would set them up with our own investors. Now, if the
Okay.
property cannot sell in 13 days, then we do another round of it, and we ask, would other institutions like Mix be interested in properties like this? Maybe their risk appetite is a bit higher compared
Mm.
to our investors, and if they're fine with it, we proceed with an application with the MIC, and have the MIC go through and look at the property, and if they're good with it, we fund it.
Mm-hmm.
That's for purchases. The other one is second and third mortgages. A lot of the times for second and third mortgages are people have experienced some life difficulties, probably some death in the family, emergency, health emergency, and there are also times where there are some family members who just couldn't manage their cash properly, so they kept on borrowing through credit cards, and
Yeah.
mom and dad comes in with some equity and says, "I'll take out a second mortgage, pay off my son's credit card bills, and then we'll go from there." And that happens a lot also. So those are the three things that I've noticed so far. Debt consolidation is becoming has been and always been a big thing. But the biggest change right now is the down payment assistance plan. That's for sure.
So even so, you just said, I mean, and there's quite a bit of questions I have now. So you said that, like, for example, when you're looking at a property, you're looking at whether it could sell in 13 days. With today's market, we're kind of seeing a stretch on that. So is that kind of inhibiting borrowers who would have been able to borrow perhaps 6 months, a year ago, that may be constrained, or is the metric possibly, could it change in terms of the risk for the 13-day sale price? Just because most houses, I would say nowadays, are not going on that 13-day kind of ramp.
Yeah, for sure. So what happens? What happens? What the adjustment in the market did was that, instead, before, people are able to lend up to 80, 85% loan
Mm-hmm.
to value.
Yeah.
sometimes even up to 90%. Right now, we're seeing people lending out from 65 to 75% loan to value just to accommodate for that risk.
Oh, okay.
And that's how it is right now. And sometimes, if that's not enough, people ask for a third mortgage because
Mm-hmm.
they just need to get up to 80% loan to value.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No,
And third
and
mortgages are very specific to investors. Some investors like that, and some investors don't. So, so it becomes a bit more tricky on the third mortgage part.
so what's attractive about the third mortgage?
You mean the rates? You mean?
I mean, for like investors, why would they want to lend out on a third mortgage?
Oh, the rates are much are way higher. Rates are way
Okay.
higher, and then their lender fees are way higher as well. We're looking at
Okay.
lender fees of sometimes 8% to 10%.
Okay. Well, that's sizable. But I mean, for the vast majority of people, I feel like, including my listeners, I feel like there's a lot of people who misunderstand private mortgages just because, firstly, it's kind of just a misunderstood area of mortgages. People kind of hear things and they don't really see what's going on. Where I find like because they say, well, interest rates is going to be really high, right? All these things, there's going to be a lender fee, all this stuff is there. But at the same time, those very same people who are kind of saying private mortgage, the rates are high, they've got a credit card balance of like 10,000, 20,000, which you're paying 25% interest on. So, or 30 or whatever it is. So what people I feel like don't really realize um, is that this investment vehicle or this loan, this product could actually save you a decent amount of money in terms of just the debt consolidation part, especially now where people are putting more money on their credit card and they feel like, you know what, like, I don't want to get a mortgage. It's going to be expensive. All of that stuff is actually going to be cheaper than going on a credit card. Do you have any kind of tips on basically people who have a lot of credit card debt and they're on kind of the brink, they're not kind of not understanding whether they should move into a private, whether it's going to be worth it, maybe they don't know what a private is? Do you have any kind of advice on what they should be looking at within their finances to help them determine whether private should be the right path and whether they should be reaching out to you for a conversation around any kind of debt consolidation?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the interesting part about credit cards or line of credits is that most of the money that gets paid is paid on interest.
Mm,
And privates, there are two types of privates that we have in the marketplace. One private is principal plus interest, and the other type of private is interest only payments. And with privates, interest rates, let's say first mortgage starts at 6%, second mortgage starts at 12%. 12% plus probably 2% lender fee for second mortgage. So that's 14%. 14% is still cheaper than 20% on a credit card. I know
yeah.
Amex for sure charges a bit more than 20% annual percentage rate because
I think most
they've
credit
reached out to
cards.
me as
Sorry about that, but most credit cards are between 25 to 30%. They're not even around 20%. Credit card's an amazing credit card.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
They say the posted rate is probably 20%,
Hmm.
but when we calculate it over the years, it's more than 20% for sure, because
Yeah.
it compounds almost every month, right?
Yeah.
It's more than 20% for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about credit cards, what they don't tell you is that your credit balance is when your credit balance is in flux, it actually messes up the whole calculation of how much percentage they're charging you. So one day they'll be charging you 20% based on that, say $10, and another day if you spend more, then you spend $5 more, then it's going to be 20% based on $15, right? But
Oh
on our
wow.
when we first take out the credit card, our mind is always thinking about the $10 only. We don't think about it going up like 15% charge on the credit card. So that's a little bit of a trick that credit card companies use, and their algorithms for calculating interest rates based on fluctuations in an account balance is not very transparent either. They make it so very difficult for individuals to understand it, much less to even calculate how it is.
Yeah.
Um,
I
the,
think
the Yeah, go ahead, please.
no, I was just gonna say I think that the reason why people kind of overlook this is that credit card companies are so easily able to kind of like just send out a card and you've got this crazy balance and you can go use it and you haven't done anything. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is that even though that credit card is not a secured credit card, often most credit cards aren't, they do look at like roughly what your assets are, what your credit score is before they offer you anything, what your income is. So they know what kind of assets are in your
That's true.
name. So they are,
That's
in a
true. They
sense,
do pull your credit.
yeah, they underwrite your credit
Yeah,
card. It's just that there's no the documents that you sign for a credit card isn't as much as you would for say a private loan, and a private loan can be a bit more intimidating, which is what scares people. And so they're like, oh my God, this interest rate so much. Also, I just feel like there's a lot of people who feel like, you know what, yeah, the interest rate's high, but I could pay it down whenever I want. And it's not going to be an issue when you have to practically look at your finances and be like, am I going to be paying this entire balance down in the next month or so, which often enough is not the case. And it's better for you to go into a private loan, whether it be interest only or private or interest plus the principal, like you just said, so that you're actually moving towards a path to keep as much money as you possibly can, as opposed to making unpleasant decisions.
that's correct. There is also one way when we're doing private mortgages for debt consolidation people is that individuals come to us with a huge credit card debt. Before we put them on a private, what we do is we have people in our team that goes and negotiate the credit card balance down.
Oh
Then we get the
wow.
private and pay that off.
Oh wow. So you're negotiating almost. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong. Nobody has to kind of file for any kind of not bankruptcy, but whatever. Like you don't have. You can go
No, it
straight to
doesn't
the.
even go to consumer proposal.
Yeah. So it's not going to show up on your like credit report like down the line that you've um,
Most of the time,
declared something.
people already that come to us for debt consolidation,
Hmm.
they're already in R2 to R5 status, which means that they
Yeah.
already missed at least 6 months, right? So
Yeah.
by that time, their credit is pretty much not that great anymore.
Yeah.
So to put it back on status, instead of providing them bankruptcy or credit consumer proposal, we negotiate the balance down, pay it
Yeah.
off with a private, and they start out fresh again. Because once the
Yeah.
balance
I'm.
is paid off,
Yeah.
their credit will go up immediately, right?
Hmm. And the bounce back is better than if you're in a consumer proposal, because I know there's banks who will not lend to a consumer proposal for like 7 years or some years after that. So it's better to have what you're saying, clean it up there, get to the mess faster than just letting it, because a lot of people panic, they don't want to look at it until it gets worse and they're forced into a consumer proposal. It's better to be proactive and kind of deal with it before it gets worse, because you're already kind of in a mess.
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
And I just want to kind of say for all of my listeners, if any of this resonates with you, and you want to reach out to Stein, his information, basic where I mean, depending on where you're listening from, it's either going to be on the bottom or on the side. So check out that. I know that normally I go through this question with my guests earlier on, but we kind of really got into this private discussion, which I thought was really fruitful, and I didn't want to kind of go back, but I want to kind of touch base on what it's like working with you. So if any of my listeners are thinking of like, you know what, maybe I want to talk about a private, maybe private's the right answer, I got to reach out to Stein. What's kind of the process? Do they have to see you in person? Are you kind of remote? Like, how do you do the signings? Like, what's your meetings like? What's that kind of customer journey like working with you for obtaining your next private mortgage?
So before the pandemic, I made everything as much as possible in person.
Mm.
There's at least one in person meeting.
Hmm.
Then everything else we do remotely. But right now, with the pandemic, everything has moved into Zoom, and the documentations and the signings are all done remotely.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that when people work with me is that people at first though they don't appreciate how honest I am, because I basically tell them the hard truth about it, and they don't like it. And but after a few months, they come back to me saying that I was right, because now that they went through other brokers, they noticed that they're not offering some products that I was offering, and they're not being as transparent as what I've told them. And they said that so they want more honesty, because they're eventually paying me to get my honest opinion. And I
Yeah.
said that that's great. If you're fine with that, then we can move forward. And usually that's how it happens. I would usually have people walk away from me first, and then they would come back after a few months, and then we would do their private. But by that time, oftentimes their debt has also increased during that time, and it makes it a bit sometimes a bit more need to be more tactful on dealing with the private, because it takes more steps, right? We need to negotiate down their debts first. We need to do a proper appraisal. We need to
Mm.
negotiate the rate with the private lender, and all of these, because when their debts increase and they're behind payments, their credit bureaus decrease as well. So during that time, private lenders will want to increase their rates, because they say, okay, this is a much more
Yeah.
riskier file for me. And for us, that's where we come in. We negotiate that rate for you, and we make sure that you save as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I mean that's why like I'm a big proponent of being ahead of it. People make mistakes, and sometimes fall behind bills. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just life. But then you can't like close your eyes to it, and I feel like you need to be able to. And again, this goes back to what we kind of started our conversation. Trust somebody, right, and to help them kind of bring you to the next stage. And I don't think, for example, even with private loans, you'd know better than I would. There's different flavors for different people, right? So depending on where you are, what your situation is, you're going to give them a different private lender, and only somebody who's kind of dealing with it nonstop, as opposed to somebody who may be doing one or two privates a year, can understand where to place you so that you can get kind of the best, you can get on that back on track again the fastest possible.
That's true. And always when we're doing privates, we always think about an exit strategy.
Yeah,
What's going to happen after 1 year? Where do
yeah,
where will we move you? Because we don't want you staying in private forever. It's
yeah,
it's it's just not financially healthy for the client. So oftentimes we would graduate clients into a B lender or an A lender if possible. If all
yeah,
debts are clear, income is there, we will graduate them to a B lender or an A lender immediately,
yeah,
and make sure that they're back on track.
yeah,
And usually it takes a lot of explaining on our part to B lenders, saying why they're moving out of private, because people create mistakes, and
yeah.
sometimes that can be debilitating. Some people just shuts down after seeing that their debt has piled up, and these are things that we need to explain to lenders when we're moving clients out from private.
Yeah, no, no, it's definitely a stressful situation. But yeah, like that's the other thing too, right? Like you can't just be with speaking to somebody or taking advice from somebody who's just saying, okay, just take this private and we'll figure out what happens after this when it happens. You need to kind of map out, at least at a very high level, kind of have an understanding of what's your exit strategy, where are you going to be 2 years, 5 years from here, what is the best way, again, like you're saying, rehabilitate your credit and get you back onto the B and the A side so that you're kind of back on track. Again, nothing is wrong with the kind of falling behind in expenses. I know lately, like inflation's gone crazy, everything's just gone crazy, completely unexpected, and you'll be surprised in terms of people who are earning well, who are otherwise really smart individuals, can fall behind. Again, the advice, at least from my perspective, would always be, even if you're falling behind now, it's never too late to get ahead. And to get ahead, you need to have those conversations. And again, I'm repeating this only because if any of my listeners, any of this resonates, and you want to reach out to Stein, I'm going to have his contact information either below or on the side, depending on where you're listening from. You know what? Thank you for joining us, Stein. Any last words before we sign off?
Remember, one last thing I want to bring up is that even if you're doing payday loans already, it's never too late to get a private.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah. No. So again, if anybody, and I would say for those of you, whether you're in the situation, whether you haven't made a decision to move into payday loans, but you see that something is piling up, reach out to Stein, start that conversation. You want to get ahead of it while you can. I mean, at one point or another, you're going to have to get ahead of it. So it's better to get ahead of it when you're in a stronger position than when you're in a weaker position. Thank you for coming on to the podcast, Stein.
Thanks for having me.